So Beth told you about my day job. I also moonlight as an edX student. And in that role, I'm very excited about those 10+1. So very, very good. I expect to learn much better now. So I was invited today to tell you a story, about how the edX platform and delivery mechanism has become the major element of W3C's sharing of educational material to the web standards and the web development community. I'm going to do that story in 3 parts. First of all, I'll give you an introduction to what W3C is and the Open Web platform. I'll then emphasize our focus on openness and then talk about our educational offerings. So in order to allow me to calibrate and figure out how much time to spend on the first part of it, I'm curious how many people in the audience have heard of W3C? Ooh. Maybe one of you will give the presentation. How many of you are very much aware of what our role is in society and where we came about and so on and so forth? Okay, that's more like about 40%. How many of you are really up to date on what we're driving nowadays? Okay, so I think we'll spend some time on the first module after all. So let's start with that. Just the background. Famously, the web was invented by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989 and quickly took off like wildfire. And within about 5 years or so, Tim had to deal with a challenge. He wanted the web to become better. He wanted every innovator in the world to be able to contribute their innovations to the web. But he also wanted the web to remain open. And the concern in those days was that maybe there would be a well-funded company that would take the basic idea of a worldwide global information database and make it proprietary and try to grab a hold of it. And actually, in the history of the web, for those that know the history, there have been such attempts. So Tim came up with the idea of creating a consortium in which everybody would collaborate their best ideas in an open fashion to enhance the technology base of the web. And, you know, if the web was one of Tim's best ideas, the web consortium was probably also one of his best ideas. Because if you look at the evolution of technology on the web, it's got a pretty good track record over the past 20 years or so. Today we have over 400 members across the globe. Tim is the director of W3C, so he drives the technical agenda of the web. We have 70 people on our team globally, which assist Tim in making sure that we achieve our mission. Our mission is the very modest and undefined goal of leading the web to its full potential, whatever that means, at a particular point in time. We consider everyone in the world to be our stakeholders, which is why openness is so important to us. And increasingly, we're focusing not only on the web as we all experience it as users, the open web, but also the fact that the web has become key to certain vertical industries. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing to support those industries as well. So it's developed into quite an interesting enterprise over the past 20 years. This is how it all started. Tim was writing down one day, gee, how do we get information shared amongst physicists? And from that, the idea just grew and grew until it became what it is today, which is basically the technology base for entertainment and commerce and education and information sharing and everything else that goes on. And to get from that diagram to where we are today obviously required a lot of work. Just to give you a little bit of the metrics that we look at to make sure that we're tied into the to our stakeholder community. We want to make sure we have a lot of members. So we have, as I said, over 400 members. I guess we added 3 in the last day or so. And our members typically can be large commercial corporations, research laboratories, universities, startups, mid-sized companies, just pretty much just about everyone that you can imagine. The way our working groups work is we're open to everyone's ideas, but we want to make sure that large companies are there as well, because at the end of the day, what they develop, in fact, does have a pretty big impact on the evolution of web technology. So we specifically track large commercial companies. That's what we call our full members. And that typically is, today, it's any company that you could think of in the web space, in the information technology space, telecommunications, and smattering other industries as well. About 4 years ago, we determined that we do a very good job when it comes to taking a mature technology to standardization in one of our working groups. We have about 50 working groups, about 1,500 engineers work in those working groups, and they work across company in an open fashion to make sure that we can get standardization. But what we also discovered was that we were a very inhospitable place for new ideas, for research ideas, for pre-standardization. And so in 2011, we created a new kind of formulation under the W3C umbrella called community groups, which was a much more agile approach. Anyone with an idea could start a new group, and it would proceed very quickly to a specification. It wouldn't be considered a standard, because it didn't go through the broad acceptance that is required for W3C standards, but at least you could get started under the W3C umbrella. So that's been very successful for us. In just 4 years, we have over 200 groups, which is 4 times the size of our standardization program. We have over 6,000 people participating, 4 times the number of engineers. So that's been very successful for us. And we track other metrics as well, the number of Twitter followers, past 100,000 in the last year or so, and of course the number of developers that use web technology is in the millions. The number of websites is about 1 billion. So those are some of our key metrics. Today, or I should say for the last 5 years or so, we've been looking out over a tremendous transformation in the nature of what the web is all about. So the web that we all grew up with was a web of static documents that people wanted to share. And typically, they wanted to share that information with other users on a computer or a desktop or a laptop, and that was pretty much it. That was the web for the first 10 or 15 years. Today's web is quite different. It's not just boring text, it's rich multimedia information. The number and diversity of devices, there's all different kinds of smartphones that are available. We show web content on televisions through set-top boxes, to the publishing industry through ebook readers, in automobiles. So what we call today's web is the most interoperable platform in history, and most interesting about that is it's not just static documents. It's really a distributed operating system for building distributed applications across the world. So in the last few years, through our most recent set of standards, which HTML5 is the most known of those standards, we've substantially broadened the technology base of the web technology. So typically, what characterizes that is a bunch of APIs, or application programming interfaces, that allows any user on any part of the planet to access the capabilities of any system or any smartphone on a different side of the planet. And this indicates some of the capabilities that we've managed to surface through our APIs. The rich media we talked about, cross-device, ability to have communications is, of course, extremely important between applications. And then very important to us is the recognition that we're working on a platform which isn't just a technical platform, but has to meet an increasingly demanding set of societal norms that people expect from the communications infrastructure of the planet. So privacy and security have been in every single newspaper every single day. There was a recent summit between the president of China and the president of the United States, where the main accomplishment was that they agreed to work on cybersecurity. So getting, I think when we originally developed the web technology base, we didn't know, no one knew how pervasive it would become and how exposed it would become. So we work on standards not only to advance the technology of the web, but to protect security, to protect privacy, and the like. Accessibility is one of our key commitments. We believe in a web for all, and roughly 15% of the population has various kinds of disabilities. And when vital services, including vital government services, are delivered to users only through the web, it better be accessible to everybody. And so we are constantly encouraging people to follow our accessibility guidelines. We're very pleased that edX is a leader in following the accessibility guidelines that we have. The other major thing that's happened in our focus over the last several years is the industry focus, because the web technology base has become the technology base for certain industries. So I probably don't have to tell you that people don't use the web just only to find out what's on television, but for certain demographics, the web is the major delivery mechanism for entertainment information. And so that brings a new set of requirements on web technology, because we have to not only be able to stream a YouTube, we have to be able to support multiple streams simultaneously, bandwidth optimization, and a bunch of industry requirements which are above and beyond consumer requirements. Another interesting industry, and I could talk about this all day, but I won't, I'll talk about only one more, is the publishing industry and how that's been affected by web technology. So when you think about what Tim's invention was 25 years ago, you could view it as nothing more than a new means of publishing. If I had information, instead of publishing it in the book, I could publish it on the web. It was different from traditional publishing because anyone could be an author. That wasn't available in traditional publishing. And I got massive immediate distribution of my information across the entire planet. That wasn't available in traditional publishing either. Those were the advantages. There were also disadvantages, like, there was no decent fonts and you couldn't do graphics or anything like that. And it was just very primitive from the point of view of professional publishing. But here we are 25 years later, and basically everything that you can do with digital publishing, including advanced graphics and many different fonts and being able to do sophisticated things like in a magazine where the text wraps around images and things like that, you can do all of that with web technology, but you can do it interoperably, which means it can run on a vast variety of devices. And so people in the publishing industry are saying, gee, we want our next investments in publishing to be on the open web platform as well. So all of this has reformulated the way that we look at our technology stack. Instead of designing it from the bottom up as a bunch of engineers, how do we do better markup? We're now looking at it from the top down. The web technology stack is used by application developers who want to build sophisticated applications. And they don't want to hear about a bunch of angle brackets. They want to understand where in the technology platform do I get the key things that I need? Where's my multimedia subsystem? Where's my security subsystem? If you view the web technology stack as analogous to an operating system, in an operating system there's a core set of low-level functions, such as process management and task management, memory management, and then there are high-level sophisticated capabilities, such as a GUI subsystem, a word processing subsystem, database and communications. So in the same way, we need to evolve our web technology stack to a well-defined set of subsystem capabilities, or what we call application foundations, to make it easier for developers in the future. Part of the reason that I emphasize some of what we're doing here in W3C is because I'm trying to help illustrate the problem that we have in education. So there are 1 million web developers out there, and they learned at some point in time how to use HTML 3.2 or 4 or 4.1. But the pace of change of the web technologies stack is enormous, and we've been struggling. How do we reach them? We have what you would characterize as a continuing education problem. We don't know who these people are. We never met them. We don't know how they learned their stuff. They're all different ages. And somehow or other, we're obligated to get them to upgrade their skills. How do we do that? So, I'm not going to get to that yet. I'll talk a little bit more about our approach to openness, which I think also underlies kind of our framework and the way that we think of ourselves participating in an ecosystem with our communities. So, about 3 years ago, W3C, the IEEE, the IETF, that's the Internet Engineering Task Force, that's the organization that standardizes the lower level of the Internet protocols. We got together and said, you know, we've been working on standards for some time. We've taken a different approach than the de jure standard systems that have existed to help us standardize most aspects of our society, like, you know, AA batteries and the metric system, and, you know, which years we have to add a second to the calendar and things like that. So there's this government-based standards organizations, such as the ITU and the ISO, and we've done things differently in standardizing the internet and the web. And it's worked out pretty well. Can we call out the principles that we've used for standardization and write that down somewhere so that way if other people want to look at developing their standards, they might consider doing the same? That resulted in an effort which we announced about 3 years ago called OpenStand. We've now written down what we think are the key principles. We extracted what does IETF do, what does W3C do. We wrote it down as a bunch of principles, and then in our case, you could click through the slides. We've done a self-evaluation, and not surprisingly, we're consistent with the way that we thought things should be done. What are the principles? There are 5 basic principles. One is cooperation. So we're not territorial. We're trying to enhance society. We're not trying to make one standards organization better than the other. W3C has 100 liaisons with different standards organizations that work on different parts of standardizing typically a certain industry, because the web technology stack touches every industry. We have 2 things that I'll develop more in the next 2 slides: the 5 fundamental principles of standards development and collective empowerment. Availability. We're very big believers that if you develop a standard, you don't sell it. You make it available by putting it on your website. And voluntary adoption. So as opposed to government-oriented standards, we think that things will catch on better if people adopt them voluntarily. The 5 principles of standards development. Due process. So if anyone in the world wants to say that the standard is wrong, they can write in a comment, they can make a complaint. And if a working group wants to standardize something, and someone thinks that they're really wrong, it's going to destroy the web if they put the parameters in this order rather than that order, or something like that. They can escalate the decision to Tim Berners-Lee. Tim is like an unbelievable director for W3C. The way that he directs most web technologies is by not being involved and by delegating it to people who have ideas that want to work it out, to these thousands of people that I talked about earlier. But he's available for escalation, and everyone knows that, and that makes sure that people are focused on getting the best technical solution. Broad consensus, which means that we standard things, A, that have a consensus, and B, we don't require unanimity. as long as there's a consensus to do something. Transparency, our processes are documented and everyone understands how they work. You may have to balance between different considerations. And openness, as I said earlier, anybody can participate. The collective empowerment point, first of all, we're looking for technical merit. So many standards are based on countries voting one way or another. And in my experiences, I don't trust most countries, but I do trust the technical community based on technical merit to choose the best technical standards. We focus on the things that have become very important for the internet and for the web. Interoperability, scalability, stability, and resiliency. A little bit more work that we require on stability, obviously. We want to enable global competition, so we don't want to help incumbents necessarily maintain incumbency. Building blocks for further innovation and benefiting humanity. Okay, let's turn to education. So, for some time, I would say for the majority of the 20 years that we've been in business at W3C, we've recognized a responsibility to help the community implement the standards. One of our most popular tools are a bunch of open source tools called W3C validators, that if you want to take your markup and validate that it's valid HTML, you run it through our HTML validator, and then you can be sure that your website will be recognized by any of the standard browsers. But while we kind of limited ourselves to that for many of the years of our existence, as I mentioned just 5 minutes ago, with the increased breadth, complexity of our platform, we decided about 5 years ago that we need to educate. And education, like a huge dynamic range of who we have to reach to. So you have a non-programmer who we still want it to be possible for a non-programmer to code up their website and be able to publish a website. And then on the other hand, we have a sophisticated developer who wants to build a mission-critical application for some company. And there are people that need introduction to new material, and then there's a continuing education for the experienced web developer. So, we decided 5 years ago we would become, educators, and we had no idea what we were doing. But where do we start? It's a very complicated demographic. It's not the kind of thing that we just start a course at MIT or something like that. So what do we do about it? So we thought about it, and one of the things we thought about is, gee, maybe we should just enable other educators, give them a sign-off. But what we heard from people is that they wanted the education to come directly from W3C. They wanted it to be state-of-the-art. They wanted it to be correct, because it's not too hard to get things imperfect. They wanted the authority and the expertise coming from W3C. So we launched something called W3 Dev Campus in 2011, 4 years ago. How many people have heard of W3 Dev Campus? 2 people. That was our problem. So actually, many more people have heard of it than 2. I'll tell you in a moment how many, but not enough. So we focused on professional education. We got ourselves, I think, experienced in what it meant to deliver education, how you would go about doing it, but we didn't really have the platform, the technology base, or the connections to reach a massive audience. Nonetheless, we persisted. We started with a SPOC, a small private online course. We created a bunch of courses that were optimized for classes of 100 learners or less. We got some teachers to help with that, and I think we did pretty well. We developed 15 courses. We reached 4,000 students. From a standing start, I'm kind of proud of the team that did it. The only problem is it didn't achieve the mission. It didn't achieve the objective. So, I mean, it was not only English, we got some courses, we got some translations of the courses to various other languages, because this is obviously a worldwide community, but did not scale. So, earlier this year, we kind of figured that we were hitting a wall, and we needed to try something different. And that was when we started to assess different MOOC options. And earlier this year, we decided to partner with edX, and we've been pretty happy with it. So we announced our first course in March 2015. And I guess not a lot of fanfare, because 3 months later we launched the course, HTML5 Coding Essentials and Best Practices, kind of like a mid-level course, continuing education for people who already are experienced HTML programmers. And 87,000 people enrolled in the course, which, it's not a million, but pretty good start for a situation that we had no previous experience with this. Of course, we needed the course content, so we leveraged the course content that we had put together in our SPOC, but then we had to remap it and revise it with the advice and the guidance of the good people at edX to what things would work in this kind of environment. And I'll tell you in the next several slides some of the things that we did and some of the things that were successful for us, and some of the areas that we need to do some further learning. In any case, by reaching 87,000 learners, I would say we achieved our target of scale. Here are some interesting metrics. We had what we considered to be probably the continuing education group, more so is the 26 and up. And so about 65% were 26 and up, so we got a pretty good range in terms of the age demographics. Also, a respectable number of entry, median age of 29. On gender diversity, we could have done better. A little bit less than 20% of respondents self-identified as female. I don't think that's a problem with our course or the delivery. I think, unfortunately, it's a problem with the gender diversity of people in the programming profession, which is a larger problem that society faces. But in any case, it's something that we need to continue to look at and make sure that there isn't anything which is discouraging. Quite the contrary, we want to make sure that we're encouraging and we can become an element to help the gender imbalance. I'm doing my part. My daughter is a programmer, so my small part. In terms of geographic global reach, we're very impressed. We reached 197 countries. Top 6 are listed here. No surprise, 4 of the top 6 are English language speaking countries: US, India, well, US, much of India, UK and Canada, and then Spain, Brazil, the other 2. The course is given in English, so we were pretty pleased to see that. 4% of the students were from the African continent, so I guess 4% of 87,000 is about 4,000 or 3,000 or something like that. There is no way that we would have reached 3,000 students in Africa, so we certainly achieved our target of global reach. Did people's skill and knowledge improve with this course? So of course, I guess probably some people, the answer was no and they didn't fill out the survey. So I don't know that we have a completely accurate survey, but of the 1,700 people that answered, so that's about 2% answered, they all got better skills and knowledge. And 2%, I think, often people don't answer surveys, so I don't think 2% is a bad number. and in general, very positive feedback about improving skills and knowledge. Some of the feedback, thank you for this course. I now have a new web design agency. So that's really good. You help with the unemployment rate, I guess. A lot of people said 5-star review for the content and for the teacher and the provider. There was a lot of information packed into this course. I mean, it was self-study, people did it at their own pace, but there was a lot of information packed into this course. How much video should we use? We were a little concerned. A lot of stuff is put out in the tech world. A lot of stuff is put out very dry. Here's the text. Here's some examples. Just work it out. So we tried to find the right balance. We tried to adjust the balance as we went through the course. That was another nice thing about the platform, is the ability to readjust as we went through the course. So typically in each module, the course instructor, Michelle Buffa, would give a nice teaser, trying to, here's some really good things you're going to learn to drag people in. That worked pretty well. And then, it wasn't just, here's the facts, but he actually worked through on a video coding examples in great detail to leverage some of the advanced features. And I think students seeing that and being able to exercise that really benefited greatly as a means of instruction. And then they went to the discussion forums to work on the exercises and do even harder examples. So it's a very nice mix. It built a very nice dynamic community. Of course, it was important that we had the instructor and other W3C staff participating in the discussion forum. Some obvious stuff, having a teacher that's passionate about teaching. Michelle Buffa is just a star, great pedagogical skills. And social media. We were very active with social media as well. So all of that was just one course, and we had big plans. So first of all, by popular demand, we are rerunning that course. And we just started that notification a couple of weeks ago. When I submitted these slides, there were 38,000 enrollees. As of this morning, it was 41,000 enrollees. So I guess the 1 million minus 87,000 people who hadn't taken the course the first time, a bunch of them are taking it the second time. But we've also learned a little bit about the business model of how to deliver courses through edX. Again, through the advice of our colleagues, they said, if instead of calling it HTML5 kind of, here's some advanced examples, best practices, if you call it part 1 and part 2, you build it into a series, you encourage people to take the multiple courses, you build a constant commitment to the continuing education, you really build education into the whole nature of the profession of being a web developer. And so we're going to investigate with a whole bunch of concepts like that, having a series of courses which we call the X series, having additional courses, CSS, now drop it down a little bit, an introductory course, an HTML5 for dummies, some more advanced courses on semantic web. We're trying to find some funding to give an accessibility course because that's extremely important to us. And those are some of the partnerships and sponsorships that we're looking to develop in the future. So I'm happy to take your questions if there are questions for a few minutes, but just to summarize, W3C is the organization for standardizing the web technology stack. We do it in a very open way. It's been working pretty well, but it's gotten more complicated given the complexity of the technology stack, the diversity of devices, the importance of industry, societal concerns, and the like. And with all of that, we need to keep a community of 1 million developers up to date on the latest thing. And at least our initial experience with edX, with W3C on edX, which we call W3CX, has been very successful, and we're hoping to continue and improve the partnership over time. Thank you, and if there are questions. If there are no questions, I'll start calling on people. Yes?
So what technologies would you say you're excited about?
Question was, what technologies am I excited about? So, I told you about a bunch of them, so I'll tell you about the ones I didn't tell you about, just to do something different. So two of the biggest things that we're working on is Web of Things and web payments. How many of you have heard about the Internet of Things? It's like it's in all the press. How many of you have heard about the Web of Things? Nobody. Oh, 2 people. Okay. So I got to work on my marketing department. So here's the thing with the Internet of Things. Like, we're going to create an internet where everything in the factory is enabled to be on the internet. They're going to get an IP address. And then we'll build factory automation apps for that application. We're going to instrument every single road in town for traffic. And then we're going to build some traffic apps by putting every road, every kilometer on the internet. But build a bunch of apps like that. We're going to take personal medical devices, our Fitbits, and we're going to put them on the internet. And then we're going to have a bunch of medical apps. So that's what the Internet of Things is all about. So one of the things that we learned with the World Wide Web initially is that if you can agree on the data formats and you can agree on publishing open data, then long-term, the sharing that comes from that is a big winner. And by contrast, if you don't have open data, you're going to end up stovepiping your applications and you will not be able to have good sharing. So we think that the Internet of Things is headed for a train wreck, and it's because the entire focus is on stovepiped applications without people worrying about how do we effectively share data about these sensors and medical devices and watches and everything else in a way that can be shared across the entire web for different applications. So we have started a new project, just the last few months, called the Web of Things, to try to get together all the people that are working on the Internet of Things and get them focused on the fact that we need a common set of data models. So that's one project that we're working on. That's a project which we're hoping to be timely with. Web payments is a project that we are very untimely with. So one of the main things that people do on the web is they buy stuff. Now, when the web started, it had a distinctly non-commercial nature to it. And we never worried about standardizing how you pay for things on the web. And the result is that every single website does it differently today. And it's getting a lot worse because now we have a whole bunch of people out there that want to build web applications, and they want to, these are people in a garage, they want to build a simple web application. They want a standard way to get paid without having to figure out a unique way to do payments for themselves. Plus, existing payment systems are kind of known for their lack of security, which is kind of a problem. Because like every month, some other company confesses that all the credit card numbers have been stolen. So about a year ago, we started an effort which has really taken us to a different place in W3C to see if we can figure out how to standardize web payments. I mentioned earlier how vertical industries are driving a lot of our attention, such as the entertainment sector and the publishing sector. So here, the financial services sector and the retail sector are another 2 sectors that have gotten extremely interested in figuring out how to work with us and standardizing some new frameworks that will help them in their industries. I could have planted that question. Thank you. Yes?
Is there anything in the works for adaptive bitrate video?
The question was, is there anything in the works for adaptive bitrate video? So, in the past, most of the video standards were done in the MPEG organization, not in W3C. And I think the reason for that is because it was viewed that there are many different applications for compression and technologies of those forms. W3C has never adopted an MPEG standard as something that we rely on in W3C, because one of our commitments to openness is that we're committed to having a core set of web technologies that are royalty-free. So all of the 400 companies that participate in W3C participate on a royalty-free basis. So we have some of the largest patent holders in the world are members of W3C. And if they make a lot of money on their patents, that's fine with us, as long as it's not on the core web. Because we think that the core web should be an open infrastructure that everybody can use as equally. And patents should be for a different place. MPEG, by contrast, their most popular standards like H.264, H.265 are heavily encumbered by patents, and so we will not recognize them. There is some movement in that area. Last month, a bunch of companies, including Google, who owns YouTube, and Cisco and Microsoft announced the creation of an open media alliance, and their intent is to create an unencumbered codec, which is patent-free based on W3C royalty-free commitments. So we'll see how that goes. But you know, that's just barely starting now. Yes?
I know the EPUB group have a subgroup working on education, EduPub. Does W3C have any working groups that are focused on education on the web?
Yeah, so we actually work very closely with IDPF, which is the standards organization that created the EPUB standard. Part of our, I talked earlier about cooperation being one of our key responsibilities. IDPF is actually a member of W3C, and W3C is actually a member of IDPF. We collaborate a lot of this stuff, like the EduPub stuff. We offered some support for that when they announced the EduPub Alliance. We don't have any actual standards track work going on in W3C in educational technology, but we do have, remember I mentioned the community groups, which are pre-standardization. A bunch of people want to develop some ideas not yet ready to be standardized. We have some community groups that are focused on educational technology, educational publishing. There's time for one more question, and you're the person who's going to ask it.
Can you say something about where the standard for open annotation stands, where it is in the pipeline, if it's kind of ready, is it a spec application?
I don't have the exact answer for that. The question was, what's the status of the open annotations standard? We started an open annotations working group about 15 months or so ago. And the way our standards develop, there's a first public working draft when you get started. It's called a candidate recommendation when you're ready to get implementations, and then a couple of other steps until it becomes a formal standard. They're definitely past first public working draft. They're definitely not at recommendation. I don't think they've gotten to candidate recommendation yet or not. I don't think they've gotten there, but I'm not 100% sure. You can just, I guess, check the website. And the information should be there. That's usually available on the website. Okay, I'm told that I'm out of time, which is good because you're out of questions. So thank you very much for your time today, and have a good afternoon.